And here we have Iain Brown in our midst again. And what a great delight it is to have you. I've chosen for the opening words, "Here we are gathered," by Patricia Sheldon. Iain, these seem to me to be appropriate words for a service which is about your thinking about these difficult questions. You have often said in services the importance of creating a worship space. In fact, we headed this one with the name, this service, with your name as the worshipping atheist. And we'll get into that later. And so we move towards lighting the chalice. Stephanie, I've given you no notice of this, but I'm kind of pinned in here. That's really kind of you to have thought of that, and I accept that completely. This simple ritual, which we repeat each Sunday, it lets us drop the burdens that we came into the room carrying. It lets us forget the fears and the anxieties, old age, relationships, regrets, and focus on the pure light before us, which contains the mystery of life, beginnings and endings. Flame dancing spirit, come, sweep us off our feet and dance us through our days. Surprise us with your rhythms, dare us to try new steps, explore new patterns and new partnerships. Release us from old routines to swing in abandoned joy and fearful adventure, and in the intervals, rest us in your still center. Those were the words, Iain, that you chose to start a service in June 2019. So we're here, Iain, to receive your reflections on a long life. Can we start off with your childhood? And if you could tell us a little bit about where you were born and your parents and that early childhood.
Yes, I think I realised when I look back on it, it's an unusual childhood, because I was born into a manse which had 32 ceilings, which all came down when the bomb fell beside us. I counted 32 ceilings of the place, for God's sake. Excuse my language. But I came to consciousness in that place. And it was just a paradise, a wonderful paradise. My father moved into the manse in Cardross, which you can see standing beside the craggy remains of a broken church on the left-hand side of the road as you drive through the village of Cardross on the way to Hillsborough and other places. Possibly, I'm sure. Anyway, then I came to consciousness and to any memory as living in that house. And I thought I'd bring a picture of it.
Yes. And sit around.
Yes. Because it's actually a set of pictures that were taken by my father when he arrived as minister of that church. That would be in 1937, I think, or 38. I would be probably three. Two, it was probably three when I kind of came to any memory of the place. And you can see there that it's beautiful, beautiful old church. It's a terrible old ruin now. It's a beautiful old ruin, actually. And that is a lovely place to come to consciousness in, so to speak.
Freedom.
Absolutely.
Freedom's wonder.
Absolutely.
When I visited you, Iain, your wee brother phoned you, Kenneth, and after you had spoken to him briefly and asked me to remind you after we talked to phone him back, and I forgot. You said to me that you've got an early childhood memory of Kenneth crying standing beside your mum and crying. Can you tell us again about that memory? I found it very touching.
Gosh.
He was crying because you'd bashed him.
He was the boy that if we were given sweets, probably over that episode, if we were given chocolate or something like that, he hoarded his, you see, and I ate mine, and then being only 3 years or 4 years old or something, or 3 years old at the most, then I thought I would. Since he wasn't eating his, I might as well have his as well. When he used to annoy me with this kind of thing, lots of times doing it, like together.
So listen to him say how hurt he'd been by you, whether that was physically or emotionally. You said to me that you didn't realize, you didn't know that you were capable of hurting.
Ah, yes, yes. That refers to a different episode altogether. That was when I was on holiday. My father, being a minister of the Church of Scotland, used to take his holidays from big church in Edinburgh to a little church far out in West in East Lothian. Beautiful place. The sort of place that people would pay millions of dollars just to own a country manse in East Lothian, with beautiful gardens and a view across wood and all the rest. And
Kenneth
was with me, but he kept on tagging me along all the time. I wanted to explore the place with myself, and he would annoy me by making this or chattering about that or something. And I must have been unkind to him. And in the evening, I was going to sleep, and I heard somebody crying. I listened to this crying, and then I realized it was my brother, and he was crying because of the way I'd been treating him. And I thought to myself, I never meant to do this to you. You know, I had no idea I was causing this grief. And that was a turning point in my relationship.
were shown such compassion to the refugees from the Clyde Bank Blitz who came to your primary school while you were still at Cardross. And they were tough kids compared to the rather posh kids. And you said you learned to fight.
Oh, they taught me to fight, yes. You couldn't go to Clyde Bank refugee and not learn how to fight. I mean, that was all right. That was very good for me because when I got to school in Edinburgh, I very quickly became the best fighter in the class.
Before we move to Edinburgh, let us sing the first hymn, which is in the Green Book 112. These are all Iain's choices, and I could see that it took him quite a long time to reach the final decision. So this one is We Look No More for Tongues of Fire. Iain, you left the freedom, the rural life of Cardross, and your father was appointed to a very big church 4,400 members in South Leith, and you were sent to Daniel Stewart's college, which provided subsidies for the sons of ministers.
I thought they had an enemy.
Bit about your father, who became a very considerable figure in the Church of Scotland.
Well, I very rarely saw. He was always up to something. He definitely. I owe him a huge amount for his care for my education. He bought Arthur Mee's The Children's Encyclopedia, all 12 or 24 volumes of it, which I still have today. And that was for my reading. And boy, did I read it once I got started. He looked after my education very, very well in that respect. I made sure I was sent to a good school, in inverted commas. Some of them are terrible, but anyway, the ones that are labelled as good. But anyway, I sent to a good school in Edinburgh and all that. And I have to thank him for that, because he thought education was immensely important. And of course, he was a well-educated man himself, more or less by his own bootstraps.
It was a very strong Christian family.
Oh, goodness me, it was terribly strong. Yes.
Very devout, and grandfather was a well-known evangelist.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
you had grace before meals,
Oh, sir.
family worship.
Oh, yes.
Son of the Mass.
It's not a blessing I would wish on anyone.
She said when I spoke to you that it had warped your life.
I was rather strong. That and learning to eat too early.
One of the things that you read at an early stage in your adolescence was H.G. Wells' The Outline of History, which was a review of world history from the beginning of human civilization to the end of World War I. And you said to me, you went and you brought down the copy from your own shelves. And it's actually quite a considerable achievement in Iain's sitting room, because accessing the bookshelves is prevented by a lot of papers and photos. And you brought down this copy, and you said that completely changed your view of religion. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. Well, the first, it made me realize that Christianity that I knew, and that everybody else around me thought they knew too, was so recent, I think, in human history. And that there was a huge backlog of people long before the birth of Jesus Christ, who had no chance to be saved the way that I was continually being faced with the chance to be saved over and over again. And so there was what was known, I came to know later, was called by the theologians the scandal of particularity. The scandal that Jesus Christ was born at a particular time and place. And that meant that some people never knew him and others never heard of him, and so forth and so on. And so the chances of salvation were kind of limited.
And that really made you look with doubt upon the way in which Christianity was expressed in your household as the only way, the way, the truth, and the life.
Absolutely, yes.
Did you have a relationship as a consequence of that? But did that impact the relationship with your parents?
Oh, yes. Oh, I decided that having come to this conclusion, I could be argued out of it. And I was not going to be argued out of it, so I thought I would get in first. went down I remember I was sleeping upstairs in this huge mansion. I went down the stairs looking for my father and mother, and there they were in my father's study talking about something. And I told them I couldn't believe in their religion anymore. And I don't think it rocked my father, but I think it.
You can't.
And I came out pleased at what I'd done. I came out, I've done the right thing, aware. I didn't say to myself, I've done the right thing, but I was aware I'd done the right thing.
You were a good student, always top in English, you said.
Oh,
You
yes.
worked hard for your hires, but prior to sitting those exams, you were very unwell for a long time.
Yeah.
You had
I had a recurrent flu-type infection, which absolutely ran me into the ground that winter.
some sort of like chronic fatigue or something like that.
There might have been an element of that in it.
They were pressing you to sit the bursary exam.
Oh, yes, in Edinburgh, then one of the merchant company schools, then the great thing for teachers was to have pupils who won themselves. In the old university, didn't matter which. I was obviously, having been first in too many subjects, I was going to be a torchbearer for the school, and I was absolutely exhausted, and I didn't have any. I was supposed to do Latin and Greek. Apologies to. Yeah, I was supposed to do Latin and Greek, and I had absolutely enough of Latin and Greek. I didn't care for the grammar. I loved the culture, but and the history. But oh no, please no. But that was what they were going to put me into the bursary competition for, and I was absolutely exhausted.
You were due to go to the University of Edinburgh.
Yes.
But something happened, Iain, that you knew you were unwell.
I knew I was unwell. And
Unwell more than physically.
well, yes, oh yes. Yes, well, it's just, I was suffering from serious exhaustion and depression. Um, and really the story goes back much further, because when I learned to read before I went to school, then I set off reading things for myself, which were way beyond my age for being interested in. So I read a book on Teach Yourself Psychology when I was about 15 or thereabouts. And there I learned about Freud and complexes. And I came out of that quite convinced that I had at least one, maybe two complexes. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yes, I have, you know. And I wanted my father to make an appointment with me, with a psychiatrist who was going to sort me out. And he wouldn't do it, and he wouldn't do it till eventually I collapsed. And the details of that are irrelevant, really. And he took me to this psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist, having spoken to me for about an hour, decided that I could either attend appointments at the hospital, or I could come in as a patient. And being the kind of person I was, I never did things by half. I said, right, I'll come in as a patient. And that was some experience.
So what age would you be? About 17?
I was 17.
And you entered a psychiatric unit?
Yes.
A 4-bedded room?
It was no, that was the 4-bedded, I was put into the receiving ward. And that's a night which I will never forget, because I was put into, in front of me, in the bed in front of me, was a guy who was raving, and seriously raving. He it was only a couple of days later that I learned that he'd actually been suffering from meningitis. But I thought he was just raving like people in the loony bin raved, you know. And just beyond him was another guy who would whimper most of the day, and he was carted off for short treatment every now and again. He was 24, I remember. He was a sailor, an awful nice guy when I got to speak to him, but I couldn't speak to him for days. And then there were other people that were just frightened me.
The impact on you.
The impact was, I thought to myself, good God, I've landed in the say this.
You also spoke to me about how there you were, just a youngster, and you must have been very vulnerable, but there was a kindness.
Oh, one of the things I learned in that hospital was the kindness of the men. And I can't say anything more than that.
Yes.
Because these older men were immensely kind to me.
Yep. You were there for quite a long time, weren't you?
Well, yes, the psychiatrist that I was put in the care of fell ill. The result was that I should have been discharged at 6 months. But he was not there to discharge me. So I managed to wangle it that I would stay on for a bit longer. But this time I was well ensconced in the blood conditions.
What an extraordinary experience for a young man to meet people with all these different psychological conditions and such.
I've never met anyone else who's had the same experience.
And it must have prepared you in many ways for your life. But you never went to Edinburgh. You chose St Andrews instead.
Yes, well, that was partly to get away from my parents and too much religion.
Mm-hmm. And
it was a kind of it was a bid for freedom. Yeah.
Yes. So let's leave you in St Andrews and sing the next hymn, which is the 226 Songs of Peace.
Yes, I actually brought with me a picture of the balance in the cross that I came confronted with. I have many memories of, and it's sitting. My father took this picture.
I think we've looked at that. We've used that round.
Oh, that's fine. Yes.
Yes, okay, now we've done that. There it is.
So he must have taken those pictures in 1958. I think it would be 38 that he arrived. I of course arrived with him. And I would be pretty around that.
Yeah.
So you see, it's a beautiful big country house, lovely little church, and all that. But what's important is that when the war went out, then 1955 war came out, then my father, as the minister of the biggest church in the parish, became the chief warden. He was the head of civil defence, so to speak. And the warden's post was where each night a warden spent the night in this room in the manse, there to answer the telephone in case the bomb started or incidents broke out. And so every night there was someone who was on duty in the warden's post. And here was me, sort of a 4-year-old, 3 to 4-year-old, clambering about the place. And this is something that someone new to. And so I would go in and bother them. And I remember being taught about how the transfer of power rose from boiling water to crank to wheels on the railway line and so on by Mr. Tanks. Seems appropriate. He was an art teacher. But among these people was a primary school teacher, a Miss Adamson, and she discovered that I was curious about letters and numbers, and so she started to teach me what letters meant, what sounds. And I was absolutely fascinated by this, and I galloped away like a runaway horse into reading. And as it happened, then my father had bought the 20-odd volumes of the Children's Encyclopedia, which stood in a room in the manse. And I started reading all this. And so I was absolutely fascinated. And then I would, there was a play group that surrounded the mill. There was a real old mill with a mill wheel and all that beside the manse. And at night, then I would join a play group there, and I would tell them about dinosaurs and volcanoes and things like that. I'd never heard of anywhere else, and they hadn't.
So you were a teacher.
What was it? I was just full of wonder. That was all.
When you left St Andrews, you became a teacher. You said,
Yes,
was nonsense.
so absolutely. Yes, but anyway, what I wanted to say was that beginning set me off on the road to perdition, because that meant I was reading everything that I could lay my hands on. And to give you an example, my father had a room full in all the mansions that I lived in. He had a room full of books lying laid out on the floor, besides all the cases he had all over the place. So I would go into this room and I picked out a book. Why on earth I picked this one out, I don't know. By a novel by a Victorian novelist, Rider Haggard. You know Rider Haggard? Yes. King Solomon's Mines.
Yes, you did at school.
Well, I read King Solomon's Mines, never to God, and I must have been only at the most I was 4. And when I got to meet the teacher, and I told her that I'd read King Solomon's Mines, she didn't believe me, and so I told her the plot. That was the beginning of my fall, because it was this early experience of reading which came to my leaving the Christian church. Because I read and read and read, and talked to other people about it. So, and among it, I read far too many things that my father didn't really intend me to read. And that brought me to reading H.G. Wells's the Outline of History, which I realised the scandal of particularity.
So you went to Shawlands Academy as a teacher, but school wasn't right for you. So you took an M.Ed, is that right?
Yeah, no, but I don't
What's an M.Ed? No.
Yes, yeah, here in Shawlands Academy.
And then you found a route to the Department of Psychology at the University of Glasgow. So that was your professional life sorted. You had a job and you were okay and you did the usual things that we all do at that main thing. But you wanted to find a religious group, and you tried the Quakers for a while.
Yes, when I came to Glasgow, then I had already suffered my deep in that, and I thought, but I'm still being a member of a group of people who are interested in pursuing the truth, who believe in the values of love and kindness, which I certainly did, was to me something valuable. And I thought to myself, I can't possibly join a church where I've got to recite a creed. So the only creedless religions that I knew of in Glasgow when I came here were the Quakers and the Unitarians. And I assembled the Quakers and assembled the Unitarians. And I don't remember who was taking service in the Unitarians. But I talked to them afterwards, and they had a good dose of alcohol from them. I thought to myself, God, does that make you, does alcohol bring speech? But that's by the by. I never met him again. I don't know where he came from. Some visiting preacher, presumably. But anyway, I decided that I was far too intellectual. I've been I read everything that passed through my hands, and I thought too much, and that really what I needed was a religious group that was more emotional than intellectual. And so I decided that no, the Unitarians were not for me. I was going to the Quakers. So I went to the Quakers. And as I attended the Quakers, then I listened to them. And of course, as most of you will know, that the Quakers believe that nobody leads the service particularly, but people are driven by the Holy Spirit within them to offer some sort of help or salvation or some kind of enhancement of knowledge and understanding. And so I listened to other people's being driven by the Holy Spirit, and I thought to myself, well, I think the Holy Spirit actually drives me just as well as them, if not better. So I started contributing to the Quakers as a member. And then people talked to me about my ministry, and I thought, ministry? I don't have a ministry with the Quakers, but some people thought I did. And then came, I can't, there's gaps in this, of course, but anyway, there came a point where I decided that it was best that I left the Quakers. Well, that was partly because I was in the process of divorcing my wife, which is another story of its own. But it wasn't really because of anyway.
You said to me, Iain, that you wanted to use your voice.
Yes. Well, when it came to the Unitarians, then I spoke to Joy Croft, who was the minister at that time, and I said that I enjoyed the service very much, but that I was someone who had a voice usually, and if I didn't get a voice in this place, I probably wouldn't stay very long. And she said, well, I'll make sure you get a voice. And so she was away another Sunday, and I took a service on death. And at the end of it, Margaret Baxton came up to me, and I thought she said, well, you won't be asked back again. She said, you.
You were,
And I was.
and you became such an important person in this church, and your name is up on the board as a lay preacher. And one of the things that you talked about to us, and I came much later in this story, but you talked about worship and the importance of worship that was not worship in the way that as the Muslims bow in front of, the East and Catholics go up to get the mass and even, you said, even in awarding honours, not that I have much time for the honour system, but we are required as subjects to step backwards from the monarch if we've received. And all of that you dismissed totally. For you, worship was something much, much bigger and more awesome. And you talked to us about Oliver Sacks and his starry, starry skies, and
Yes.
your sense that the brain is larger than the universe.
I don't remember that, but I do remember that my experience of worship has always been a pagan experience of worship. My experience of worship comes when I get outside light pollution of the city of Glasgow, and view the stars in a night sky.
Yeah.
And to me, that is worship. And I understand people who worship the spirit that they imagine exists in this particular spring, and who worship a mountain. And so I understand people like that. I am a pagan, so help me.
Yeah.
I never become a pagan. I'm a pagan, and that's my form of worship. And I don't worship any other human being fully. I mean, I could anyway.
Yeah. No, that's lovely. Thank you, Ian. That really, I think, is what we wanted to get a sense of. Let's move to the next hymn, which is hymn 302, as each day ends. It's been a great privilege, Ian, to know you, to listen to your thoughts about worship and about the importance of religions that, as you say, are closer to the pagan concept of awareness. In one of your services, you used a quotation from Bertrand Russell, and I'm going to repeat it just now as we approach the end of this service. Brief and powerless is man's life. On him and on all his race, the slow, sure doom falls pitiless and dark. Blind to good and evil, reckless of destruction, omnipotent matter rolls on its relentless way. For man, condemned today to lose his dearest, tomorrow himself to pass through the gate of darkness, it remains only to cherish, ere yet the blow falls, the lofty thoughts that ennoble his little day. Disdaining the coward terrors of the slave of fate, to worship at the shrine that his own hands have built, undismayed by the empire of chance, to preserve a mind free from the wanton tyranny that rules his outward life, proudly defiant of the irresistible forces that tolerate for a moment his knowledge and his condemnation, to sustain alone a weary but unyielding Atlas, the world that his own ideals have fashioned despite the trampling march of unconscious power. And in many ways, Ian, that is who you are, that Atlas, holding up the world of your own ideals.